Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this work session of the City Utilities Committee to order. Today is Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. I am Councilmember Antonio Lewis, Chair of the City Utilities Committee, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Byron Amos, Councilmember Alex Wan, and to my left, Councilmember Matt Westmoreland. On behalf of the City Utilities Committee, I extend a warm welcome to our esteemed committee members, dedicated city staff, and members of the viewing public who are joining us either in person or virtually. Today's agenda, we're here to discuss an issue that has been the focus of several conversations and concerns of the public for over the last few weeks. Water main breaks, repairs, and preventions. Commissioner Al Wiggins and his team will present and give us an update on the status of the multiple water main breaks that have occurred and prevention strategies that are being considered or implemented. Following the presentation, we will open the floor to discuss among council members and city staff and engage the dialogue to help the public understand our water main issues. Public input is highly valued, and there will be a dedicated time for public comments. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the committee. Your insights are crucial in shaping our decisions, and we appreciate your participation. Unlike in committee meetings, the public would actually get an opportunity to hear the presentation from the department and then ask their questions, which was a change. As we conclude, we will outline the next steps, ensuring a clear understanding of the path ahead. Let's proceed with the agenda. And I'd like to say we've been joined by the Honorable Councilmember Andrea Boone. Commissioner Wiggins, can you approach the podium, please? Oh, Ms. Burks. COO Burks, could you please approach the podium?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to members of the committee and members of City Council who are here with us today. Good morning. My name is LaShondra Burks. I serve as the Chief Operating Officer here for the City of Atlanta. And I will actually start us off, Mr. Chair, if that's okay, as we go through the actual slides. So just to give you an overview of our presentation for this morning, I will start with a systems overview, and then I will turn it over to Commissioner Al Wiggins of the Department of Watershed Management, who will kind of walk you through the water main breaks that we had at Joseph E. Boone and James P. Brawley and the 11th Street and West Peachtree main breaks. Following Commissioner Wiggins, I'll turn it over to Mr. Asher Morris, who's the Deputy Director of the Emergency Preparedness Office, to really talk about the whole of government and how we responded to this water main break and kind of give the City of Atlanta's collective emergency response. Followed by Invest Atlanta Water Relief Program, as council was introduced by Councilmember Westmoreland and approved by the City Council body to approve a water relief fund. Dr. Eloisa Clementich will come and give an update on where we are currently with that fund. Then we will have our Chief Strategy Officer, Peter Amon, to come forward and kind of give you a system review and overhaul. You've heard us talk about a Watershed Advisory Committee, the Army Corps of Engineers, so you'll be able to hear more in detail about those. And then Commissioner Wiggins will come back and close us out with our current activities and next steps. And so that is kind of the flow that we will have, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
It is, thank you.
Thank you. So just a quick overview, of course, through the Department of Watershed Management, the city is actually very much responsible for providing clean, safe drinking water, wastewater collection and reclamation, investing in infrastructure to improve resilience. And even though this kind of gives more so of the drinking water side, there are many other responsibilities of the Department of Watershed Management as it relates to stormwater and other things. But for today, because of the water main breaks, we will keep our focus specifically to the drinking water. And what we have here are things that many of you know, but it also helps to lay the foundation for either those who are here in our audience as the public or those who are listening in, but just a quick foundation of our water and sewer system. As you know, the Chattahoochee is the source of Atlanta's drinking water. We serve right at about 1.2 million people each day with drinking water. Approximately 136.5 million gallons of wastewater are treated each day between R.M. Clayton and the South River Reclamation Centers. 97.4 gallons of drinking water each day go through the Hemp Hill and the Chattahoochee water treatment plants. And Atlanta has approximately 2,750 miles of drinking water pipes and 1,930 miles of sewer pipes. So also want to just let you know that the Department of Watershed Management, as you know, manages our funding that comes through the municipal option sales tax. Many of you as council members were very supportive in helping us to educate the public when it was on the ballot on May 21st of 2024 with an overwhelming support of Atlanta moving forward with what many of us call the most. Want to give you some examples of repairs. A lot of time you hear water main breaks, water main breaks, water main breaks. But each time you hear that, there are very different repairs that have to be done in a water main break. And we also have some pictures here to help with that. It could be a leak from a cap. It could be a valve replacement that we need to do, a fire hydrant service repair. It could be a damaged sleeve on a pipe that we may have to replace or repair, a service line leak, and it also can be a meter and service line damage. And we often hear sometimes that these breaks come from aged pipes, but I also don't want to exclude that many times a lot of these come from our utility contractors who are doing work in the areas and may start doing some drilling and unfortunately may puncture a pipe. So those are all the different reasons why we hear water main breaks and what could happen among those. Just to give you an overview, we pulled the data of our annual water main breaks dating back to the beginning of this administration in your council seats that you're in right now. So in 2022, we had right at about 410 water main breaks, 2023, 374. And so far this year for 2024, we're at 176, which leads us to a total of 960 water main breaks over the course of 2022 to present. Now, what we can see, fortunately, is you will see in some of the investments from some of our most dollars and our enterprise fund dollars through the Department of Watershed Management and some of the repairs that are being done, is that we're starting to see a decline in our water main breaks. Will we ever get to a point where this number is zero? Absolutely not. But as much work as we can do to make these numbers continue to go down, the better off we will be as a city. And so at this time, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Al Wiggins with the Department of Watershed Management, who will come and walk you through exactly what kind of happens specifically at James P. Brawley and Joseph B. Boone, as well as 11th Street and West P Street. Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you. Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you, COO Burks. Good morning, Chairman Lewis and committee members. Al Wiggins, Commissioner, Department of Watershed Management. What I'd like to do is just kind of recap the events that led to the work session today. Again, this was a very unique situation. We had two major water main breaks that occurred over the course of a weekend, which was May 31st. The initial break occurred at James P. Brawley, at Joseph E. Boone. This particular area is where three major transmission lines intersected. This is a very unique configuration, something that you don't see throughout our water utility network. So to interrupt or to terminate water service at that particular location, we had to disconnect services for several of those lines, which resulted in many of our customers having to endure a certain period of time without water services. Out of an abundance of caution, we issued a boil water advisory just to ensure that our drinking water meets the highest standards. The second water main break occurred at West Peachtree Street and 11th Street. Again, this was a very unique situation because we weren't able to terminate water service at the point of the break, mainly because the valve to terminate services was directly under the break. We strategically went a little bit further out to try to close out valves without interrupting services to other customers. And we also had a very unique part that we had to source. Thanks to APD, we were able to get that part in through a partnership with the Georgia State Patrol, and that part was escorted into West Peachtree and 11th, and that issue was resolved shortly after. Give an update on our situational overview. We received feedback on the level of communication, the frequency of communication during the main break, and in response, we began to provide updates every 2 hours. But during the course of 5 days, we were able to hold 4 press conferences, 3 interviews. We had 5 briefings with the City Council, 13 press releases, 117 social media posts, 10 notified ATL mass notifications. These are citywide notifications. And we also had 5 small business touch points. And over 100 small businesses were contacted regarding the City of Atlanta Recovery Fund. I'll come back a little bit later in the presentation to talk about preventative measures to prevent a reoccurrence of what we experienced on May 31st. For now, I'll pass the presentation along to Mr. Asher Morris, who's the Deputy Director of Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you, Commissioner. And can we turn up the microphone a little? Or if we can make sure that everybody's talking into the microphone, not mine, but the microphone at the podium.
Good morning, Chairman Lewis, members of council. My name is Asher Morris. I'm the Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness. Our role in the city and in events like this is cross-functional coordination. And for May 31st to June 6th, that's exactly what we did with the leadership of the Mayor and the COO throughout this whole of government response. We gathered together 15 city departments, including the Department of Watershed Management, Atlanta Department of Transportation, the Department of Aviation, Atlanta Information Management, Department of Public Works, Atlanta Fire Rescue Department, Department of Parks and Recreation, Department of Procurement, Department of Finance, Atlanta Police Department, Department of Corrections, ATL 311, Department of Law, Department of Human Resources, Department of Enterprise Asset Management, and 6 executive offices, the Office of Constituent Services, Office of Communications, Office of International and Immigrant Affairs, Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resilience, the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and of course, the Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness was involved. The response also included Atlanta E911 and partner agencies like Partners for Home, the Gateway Center, and Invest Atlanta. Throughout this whole of government response, in addition to receiving and making several phone calls connecting people and resources, we also facilitated 15 coordination calls and 4 in-person briefings when the city's Joint Operations Center was activated. This response was a 2-front response. First, of course, the Department of Watershed Management's response to isolate and repair the breaks, and second, ensuring water resources were available. To that end, 262 pallets of water were procured, over 192,000 bottles of water were distributed through various mechanisms. First, in serving more than 15,000 residents in this mechanism, over 90 water deliveries were made to senior facilities, nursing homes, shelters, the immigrant communities, colleges and universities like Morehouse School of Medicine, Spelman, and Morris Brown, and to city facilities, including our Department of Parks and Recreations facilities, City Hall, Department of Corrections, and fire stations, which leads to the second method that we used, distribution via pickup at fire stations. And we did that at 6 fire stations 1, 2, 10, 11, 15, and 16. In addition to that, Atlanta Fire Rescue Department supported Grady Hospital by making sure that their water tankers were full. and supported our critical data centers here at City Hall specifically in partnership with AIM and DEEM, who provided coolers, by ensuring the chillers remained full so that the HVAC systems were operable. The distribution process also involved 10 city departments and offices. As with most of our major critical incidents, or any critical event, the Mayor's Office of Emergency Preparedness is also compiling data. We're collecting feedback through a layered approach, which includes real-time conversations during the incidents, an after-action survey, and an after-action meeting. The purpose of this, of course, is to help us prepare for the future. Here on the screen, you can see some of the preliminary feedback that we've received, including best practices or strengths identified during this response, which includes leadership, collaboration, cohesion, coordination, communication, teamwork, unity of effort, quick mobilization of on-call staff and staff flexibility, and a good base of suppliers that we already had in the system. Some areas of opportunity that were identified through this feedback: communications, which includes both internal and external communications, as well as initial and ongoing notifications, an emphasis on more planning, more training, and more exercising, inventory management, and making sure that we're aware of all storage space available to us at all times. The Mayor often speaks about Atlanta as a group project, and this response highlighted the pivotal nature of our relationships with community partners, the importance of drawing circles, not lines, and the whole of government unity of effort in support of our residents and business community. This response was a group project. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. K. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Clemente.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Klementich. It was interesting, once the event occurred, Invest Atlanta was asked to prepare a small business recovery program. So what we did is we reached out to several small businesses, we reached out to several of our associations, we reached out to several of our technical assistance providers to ensure that we created a small business program that would be efficient and that would really provide the support that the small businesses were looking for. So what we first started to do was we highlighted the businesses that we thought would be prioritized. So we really looked at what type of business you were operating. So we thought, based on these conversations, if you were, for example, an accountant or a lawyer, you potentially could go work from home, where there were some businesses that had to close. For example, hair salons, nail salons, daycare centers, these facilities had to close. So therefore, we put a prioritization on these certain NAICS codes, and they're up on your screen. Then we decided to look at not only the number of days that you were impacted, the size of your business. So therefore, we tailored a small business program that not only highlighted and emphasized those that had the highest impact in terms of days, but those businesses, depending on their size, would really impact the amount of funding that would be available to you. We have now opened the program, and the program closed as of yesterday. We have received a total of 894 applications, of which 535 were completed and submitted, and we will begin to analyze those now. We were happy to see that the response rate, those who started and then therefore finished, was 67%, which is one of the highest we've ever seen. So we are looking forward now to evaluating the information and getting the data out, getting the funds out just as quickly as we can. And I will turn it over.
Thank you.
Good day, Peter Amon, Chief Strategy Officer. So we're going to turn now to, or from the short-term response to this critical incident to the longer-term planning and strategy of the city. Just as context for that discussion, we've included a slide which gives our current inventory of pipes by age. So it's stratified left to right by age. You'll see at the bottom the number of feet and mileage. You can, if you like, calculate the percentage of each category. I won't obviously go through the chart in detail, but what it highlights is that there are pipes out there that are 100 years old. Roughly, I think 4.5% of the system of this size is represented in that first column. There are ones that are even older than that in some cases. There's another 4 or 5% of indeterminate age, some of which may be newer, some of which may be older. This is a problem a long time in the making. And so while it is not a problem that this council or this administration created, it is our problem collectively to resolve and get the city on a firm foundation for reliable service and future growth. So that is the situation we are confronting. Given the magnitude of this challenge, the mayor, in consultation with others, created a water advisory committee. So the Atlanta Water Advisory Committee, this has been previously reported on. It is intended to be a small group of individuals. It is not dissimilar from some other committees over time. You may remember the Clough Committee from many years ago on the sewer issues that provided very valuable advice and counsel to the city. This group similarly has extraordinary expertise on it. Former Mayor Franklin, Dr. Bea, Mr. Fan, Mr. Johnson, Katie Kirkpatrick, and perhaps a few others. You see their experience there. These are all individuals who have significant management and engineering and other expertise that we are already consulting as we look at what is a major effort of the City of Atlanta over the next number of years. In terms of the scope and purpose of this committee, first and foremost, it is an assessment of our current drinking water system. You saw the inventory of age of pipes, but that does not directly correlate to the condition of those pipes. Obviously, there are certain conditions which will cause pipes to age further, the surrounding soil types, the degree of drainage around them, the degree of exposure to cold temperatures and so forth, the pipe material themselves. So before you can start on what is required, a major replacement effort, you need to do a condition assessment. Thankfully, the administration, the mayor, in contact with our federal partners, has been able to get the Army Corps of Engineers to come and do an assessment of the major mains. Those are mains that are 16 inches or greater. There's roughly 450 miles of those. So this assessment will take 18 months. I'll talk a little bit more about the Army Corps of Engineers assessment and how it works in a minute. We will, of course, be doing assessment of the smaller pipes as well as the treatment and other systems, because remember, plants like Hemp Hill are quite old as well. And when you go there, they're clean and well functioning, but we need to make sure they continue to be that way, and they will need additional upgrades. I would be remiss if I didn't also point out the cybersecurity and technology and systems side of this. These plants are run by SCADA systems or distributed control systems. Those all have vulnerabilities, as do the actual actuators in the valves and so forth. So first, this committee will help give us advice and counsel on the assessment of the system. Obviously, then coming out of that will be recommendations on the replacement of the system. The whole system does not need to be replaced. Depending on the pipes, you can have a 75-year lifespan on a pipe or greater. Some of them are less so. So it's a combination of assessing the condition, the type of pipes, the growth of the city, coming up with recommendations for replacement. Obviously, you then need to interleave that with other construction programs in the city, because you would hate to tear up a street for a water main for a year later to tear it up for a complete street project. That would be obviously disappointing to the residents and from a cost perspective. You might hear about that, for example, in your district. And then finally, the third thing this committee will work on is an assessment and recommendations around disaster preparedness and the responsibilities of us as individuals and collectively as a city. This will focus obviously on water, but will encompass other topics as well. As we grow as a city, as we move into a more dynamic global environment, we certainly can do more to be prepared for whether it's a shortage of water or other utility or other services. Specifically in terms of the Army Corps of Engineer process, the Army Corps of Engineers has significant expertise in this. They do work of this type around the country. They do a lot of work around the world on military bases and in other situations, and they have some true world-class experts. They will be doing an assessment and creating recommendations first and foremost around our current risk and resiliency plans, which we have. So they'll be going through those existing plans and providing recommendations on those. And then in terms of the actual condition assessment, first you have to create a work plan, you have to prioritize the pipes, you have to schedule the assessments. You then have to do field work. So depending on the pipe, you may do internal inspection, you may do non-destructive testing of certain types. You first, in some cases, have to locate the pipe through ground penetrating radar or sonar. And then, of course, you have to figure out your recommendations, and ultimately they will provide a prioritized list of recommendations. Again, these are the 16-inch or greater pipes that have the biggest impact and risk, and also provide us with a very rough order of magnitude cost of replacement. So that will be their project. With that, I will turn it back over to Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you. Commissioner Wiggins, please. We've been joined by Councilmember Mary Norwood as well. Thank you.
Chair Lewis, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, the public
Okay.
was talking about it.
No, I just wanted to make sure I was close enough to the mic. I think I was a little faint last time. So we'll move on to our capital improvement program summary. You'll see over 5 years, we're projected to spend about $1.4 billion in projects. This is about 89 projects. The bulk of this work will involve consent decree work for wastewater collections and also for our drinking water supply and our wastewater facilities. This is not our only funding sources that we're looking at. We're looking at also securing additional funding through our lobbyists, through state and federal funding as well. So we'll move on next to our AI technology project. This is a leak detection project that I mentioned to you the last time I visited. We're in our 3rd week of installing the leak detection devices. We have about 90 devices installed so far. We're about halfway through this project. This is, again, an AI technology project. I received a few questions about what really makes this an artificial intelligence project. It's mainly because the installation of these devices will allow us to do somewhat of a predictive analysis. And when these devices are installed, they will collect data based on the specific characteristics of the pipes or a hydrant or whatever water utility structure that it's installed on. So it would also help us to prioritize repairs, increase operational efficiency, and more importantly, to detect leaks prematurely before a full-blown water main break occurs. That concludes today's presentation, and I'm happy to address any questions should you have any.
So I'll open it up. Thank you, Commissioner. I'll open it up to my colleagues. Councilmember Juan.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the information from you and the whole team. A couple of things I just want to lean into, and this first question may be for Mr. Amon. In terms of the Water Advisory Committee and the Corps of Engineers assessments, what's the timeline for that?
A great question. So the timeline for the Army Corps is 18 months. That's the timeline they've given us. The timeline for the overall Atlanta Water Advisory Committee is roughly 2 years. And when you think about the length of time it has taken us to get in this situation, the overall timeline to replace the parts of the system that need to be replaced is in the decades, right, when you talk about the whole system, since it's of such an age.
So yeah, I appreciate kind of that perspective. I guess, you know, the public will certainly think 18 months and 24 months is a long time to be flying blind in terms of things that we should be doing or could be doing in the interim. So is there anything baked into either one of those processes that at least gives a feedback loop of what our current repair replacement plans are versus what will come down the pike later on in terms of a more comprehensive recommendation?
Absolutely. It did, in fact, seem unreasonable to ask people to have an 18-month supply of water at home, since that would be substantial. So there's a whole host of activities. You heard the commissioner talk about first and foremost, additional sensors being put in place. And so those sensors will give us early warnings about small cracks that then become leaks. Interestingly, in water systems, particularly water systems of our age, as a term of art, a small crack that leaks a little bit of water is not considered a leak. Because of the age of the system, there are a number of those. These artificial intelligence-driven devices allow you to detect those. Those are being deployed as we speak, as you heard him say. Additionally, we're looking at this matrix of age of pipes and then criticality. So if there's a very old pipe, for example, supplying a hospital, we're not going to wait for the Army Corps of Engineers to go out and do the field work. That's the type of thing where we'll be doing a series of things. First, we'll be doing initial examinations on our own. We'll be paying special attention to exercise the valves that isolate that area, because these valves you can't just leave sit there. They have to be exercised on a periodic basis. So there will be a whole host of things based on the risk, the impact of that risk, and so forth.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that, because I think there's some intuitive things based on our experience and what y'all found in the field in this coincidence that should inform adjustments, revisions, or responsive as well as predictive actions we can take with, again, the plans that we already have, or the thought on what we might do in the next 18 to 24 months. I just, would suggest too that you've got two very august bodies with great minds and perspective that, that might be another way to continue utilizing them as they're doing their comprehensive piece on this. And I don't know who's going to answer another one of the comments that I've been fielding with regard to the incidents has to do with, and this ties back into kind of that strategy, the repair, the critical or potential pressure points, is are we going to tie this into redevelopment plans in terms of thinking about if there are big projects, big things that will put additional demands and pressure on our infrastructure in locations where we're already, there's already a high concentration of aging infrastructure. Is that conversation happening, and how is it happening?
So that's a great question, Councilmember Juan. But before I address that question, I wanted to add a few comments to CSO Amon's statement. So we are also in the process of onboarding a new asset management software program, and this will help us to, we've already had an asset management plan in place to begin with, but this software program will allow us to be more proactive in our approach with identifying the life cycle of our infrastructure and planning repairs. And so that software program has been onboarded. We're looking to put the core data into that program. So probably Q1 of next year, it'll be a fully functional plan. Would also like to mention that now we have a dedicated crew and a consultant that focuses on low water pressure issues, which is sometimes indicative of a water main or a potential water main break, or issues in our water distribution supply line. So those are two things that it's not all encompassing, but those are two major things that we're doing to continue to work while we work with the Army Corps of Engineers. As far as your question about what we're doing for planning for future growth, we're looking to implement two positions into the department. One is an infrastructure planner. This position will work closely with the Atlanta Department of Transportation, the Atlanta Regional Commission, and also our federal partners. We're looking at what infrastructure is needed, looking at the existing infrastructure, and how do we coordinate activities with our partners, local and state and regional. We're also looking to add a water resources planner position into the department. As you know, we do provide water services to some of our southern tiered cities. We're very concerned about some of the businesses that they are proposing, data centers, which consume millions of gallons of water per day. So the water resources planner will work with those southern tiered cities, and of course, our Department of City Planning as well for any proposed projects or developments. So hopefully that addressed.
It does. I think that is something, whereas we don't necessarily have as much control over when infrastructure might have issues, or that is one thing that we could have a little more influence and control over is being thoughtful about not overstressing geographic locations where the infrastructure may or may not already be vulnerable. So I'm glad to hear that y'all are looking at that. My next question could be for you or the emergency preparedness deputy director, but the other big criticism that we received, and I'm glad to see that it is in areas of opportunities, is under communication. So I'm curious as to the timing of it says here that there's going to be a compilation of results into an after-action report and improvement plan. Kind of curious as to when we think that will be completed and available for just review and comment.
I'll pass that along to
Okay.
Mr. Asher.
Thank you. We're still in the process of collecting all the data. I don't have an exact date for you, but definitely within the next few months is our goal. It's a lot of information to collect and a lot of information to analyze. So we're actively working through that.
Okay. Similar question then. I would think that some of these, there's some intuitive things, that revisions and adjustments we can already start preparing and planning for, especially given, again, I think that was probably the biggest frustrations or criticism that we fielded as council members. So I'm hoping that, that there can be some short-term quick adjustments based on experience, and then once you get all of the information in, that there's a more comprehensive, more complete. But I think there's some things that we know we could do today already, or we could suggest. Council could probably suggest to you today a handful of things in terms of actions. And something else I was going to say about that. But yeah, I think what the public wants to know is that we've learned from that experience. Oh, I know. There was one other question I wanted to ask, and it's not you, and it's infrastructure. I think one of the other things that we were surprised at was the mapping piece, the inventory location, right? Because of the 11th and Midtown, that was the biggest thing, was that, West Peachtree, was that we didn't realize, we knew the valve was in the area, but we didn't realize it was right under where the break had happened. So is that also part of kind of the preventive or just prioritization of, hey, while we're looking and identifying the critical areas, that let's go ahead and go and do some inventorying and geolocating of where all the assets are?
So that's a great question. We did believe that there was a valve closely located to the break, but during that time, we knew that we just couldn't access the valve. So there was not a question if there was a valve in close proximity of the break, but that does go back to our asset management program, us being able to geolocate these devices and put that information into the asset management system.
Okay. Yeah, again, I mean, I think if in this period, my gut tells me that basically we should think about where the most vulnerable spots are because of convergence, and then to the extent that we can, if even in advance of a planned repair or replacement, that we quickly do, just make sure we know exactly what is there, where, so that we're not surprised and we don't lose valuable time when if unfortunately an incident occurs, that we can go in and shut water off, repair, and then get back out. So.
Yes. So you may have heard Chief Strategy Officer Amon mention that we are now exercising our valves more than we were in the past. That was something that was a practice that was in place. But the vendor, the consultant that we brought on board to identify low pressure issues, they are also exercising the valves. They're doing a condition assessment. And so that has helped. We've also done a few test shutdown procedures and notified the neighboring residents just to understand if those valves will work in the time of need and if they service the areas that we anticipated.
Well, Commissioner, I mean, again, thank you and your team for all the work and the cross collaboration that happened as well. I mean, that was a really difficult thing to maneuver, but I'm glad we're on this end of it, and you're doing exactly what we need you to do right now, is now that we're on the back end, let's figure out what we need to do to prevent, or if it happens, be prepared. So thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield.
Thank you. Councilmember Matt Westmoreland. It looks like our COO had a few things.
Just one additional comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the lessons learned and some short-term implementations that we put in place. I will say that at that very next cabinet meeting, we spent the entire cabinet meeting kind of debriefing, getting input from everyone. And one of the things we heard loud and clear from this council, as well as from the public, as well as from our internal stakeholders, cabinet members, was communicating earlier. And the amount of communication that we were doing. And so I'm hoping that we implemented on July 4th, what you did not see back on this last break, the James P. Brawley and 11th Street, where as soon as we realized what was going on, we began communicating out to the public, as well as communicating out to council every hour, pretty much on the hour, the progress of the work that was being done. Even by closing out, by commending our team, because the 2 water main breaks that we're talking about today, we had to call in contractors to do the work. The one that happened on July 4th was work that was done by our employees within the Department of Watershed Management, and it was handled in under 6 hours. And so I would be remiss if I didn't, one, talk about us communicating more frequently and faster after the break happened, what was going on, as well as commending our employees for the awesome work that they did in a short period of time, and all the departments, how we came together quickly to mobilize and work with those 5 apartment complexes nearby who were impacted by that. And so I would be remiss if I did not take an opportunity to just say that there were some very short-term lessons that we learned that we're implementing and not waiting on the after-action report. So thank you.
Councilmember Juan. Councilmember Matt Westmoreland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone, for the presentation. A couple questions. We touched on them briefly, but for anybody, could someone come up and talk a little bit more about the buildings? Clayton, Utoy, South River Reclamation Centers, and then Hemphill and Chattahoochee, just how old they are, their condition, and how they are factoring into we've spent a lot of time talking about pipes, and rightfully so, but if you could just touch on the buildings a little bit.
So I'd like to give you a complete profile. If I had it handy and available, I would tell you that Hemphill was built circa 1920s. And RM Clayton followed shortly after. So as you mentioned, these are aging facilities. You'll see in the capital improvement plan that we're making significant investments in our WRCs and our pumping stations. The $1.4 billion investment is a start, but we recognize that there are more opportunities to upgrade our facilities, not just from a standpoint of the brick and mortar of the buildings, the internal infrastructure. Is you heard CSO Amon mention the SCADA system, which helps us to automate these facilities and to make sure that they're functioning remotely as well. But I apologize, I'm happy to provide a complete profile of these facilities post of this meeting, but I think you've touched on it. There are aging facilities, and we're making the incremental investments into these.
Yeah, no, any
structures.
and all information you have on all 5, I'd love to take a look at it.
Yes.
And then on slide 9, what kind of conversations, if any, internally have taken place about forward momentum from the current program to at least the DMW master plan, if not getting further along to the council recommendation? It kind of goes back to Councilmember Juan's question about things we can do in the next 18 to 24 months. So I'm curious about what conversations have happened in the last month or so about
Yes, so
making
as it
progress
relates
to get us to the right of the chart.
Oh, I'm sorry. So as it relates to our water main replacement program, you may have heard CSO Amon mention that we're looking at the older parts of our infrastructure, about 440 miles of our water distribution supply lines are 75 years or older. That's about 16% of our water supply lines. And so we are, again, we're looking to work with our lobbyists to engage any type of federal funding that's available to jumpstart this process. And if we're not successful in that endeavor, we will continue to replace the oldest portions of our infrastructure. But we're also continuing that work while waiting to hear from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you. Councilmember Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so many questions, but some thank yous. To be honest, I did not know the lack of communication on that day was taking place because I was there with the commissioner, with the CEO, and I have to admit there were several times we thought we had it fixed, and the leak had a mind of its own. So every time they got ready to send out, it's all done. It started back leaking, so that was the setbacks that I did see. Just some thank you on the reassurances. I am glad that we had our own crews on this last leak because I was kind of disturbed to see contractors in the first two leaks where we have people in the city that definitely need to work. So that was a blessing. But the biggest piece is making sure we did not lose sight of what is important to the people I represent. With this being hurricane season, true, we all need drinking water, but the potential of flooding, storm water, when we talk about Clark Atlanta University, Vine City, Urban Villa, Hunter Hills, when it rains, our lack of capacity to hold storm water ends up in people's living rooms, bathrooms, and things of that nature. So I was glad to hear that the committee will be looking at a holistic approach and just not drinking water in our pipes, but everything. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you.
Any of my other colleagues? I have a few questions myself. I know we're speaking a lot like we are, I know we're working on this, but in my district, the PSI levels, as you know, have not recovered. And today, as we speak today, is about 35 PSI on Lee Street. So Capitol Gateway, the water's not reaching the top 2 floors. In my high rise, I have businesses that have, for the past year, they've been studying and watching the PSI levels. And so recently, since you came over, we've created a new partnership with that business in which 3 times per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 a.m., we're having a phone call for about 30 minutes, just looking at the PSI levels. And so my questions are surrounding around the recovery on this. Is there a plan, or where are we on getting the PSI levels back to where they were and stronger?
So Chair Lewis, that's a great question. I'll go back to the consultant that I referenced a little bit earlier that is solely focused on low water pressure issues. In fact, we are working with the Teamsters. They have a building in your district on Lakewood, and they were experiencing low water pressure issues also. Last Friday, we were able to increase that water pressure through the identification of a valve that needed to be replaced and a valve, ironically, that needed to be closed to distribute more pressure to that building. So we have had some success. This is a 2-pronged issue. Our commitment is to ensure that everyone receives at least 40 PSI. Unfortunately, some buildings have been engineered to operate at pressures above 40 PSI. But we recognize that there's still a challenge for them to carry out day-to-day activities. And so we are working with them, although our commitment is to ensure that 40 PSI or greater is delivered. And when they fall in that 40 PSI, and if they say, well, hey, Commissioner, we were receiving 60 PSI before, we're going to continue to work with that business to make sure that that business can operate successfully. You mentioned there is a building, I believe, in the West End area. We're in the process of replacing, a 30-inch valve on James P. Brawley that we're hopeful that will increase water pressure in that area. This is truly a process of elimination, just identifying, utility lines that may be impacting a small segment of our network. But yes, we are focused on those complaints, and we have a dedicated crew to address those issues.
Thank you. A few more questions, and I want to know the status of your capital plan and the performance of its execution.
So the capital plan, you'll see here on the slide in front of you, we're actively working on it. I'm working with the team to see if there are any areas that we may need to reprioritize. As you know, our focus is on our treatment plants and our water utility infrastructure. Moving funding around to different locations in order to get the goal accomplished is not our first resort, right? We're looking at adding additional funding. Once we work with the Corps of Engineers and develop a comprehensive plan outside of what we already have in place. But to answer your question, the capital improvement program is in place. It's working well. It's progressing as we thought. But we're not satisfied with what we have as it relates to funding, and we're looking for additional sources.
Okay. So that means that's going to be some change going forward. And I know I've been able to work with you in other departments, so I understand how you're going to attack this stuff, and I appreciate working with you before now. But I just want to make sure that we fix some of this stuff.
Well, we're going to continue with the plan as you see outlined on this presentation slide. But again, we're looking for additional funding sources to really, as I would say, add rocket fuel into the plan to be able to replace more of our water utility infrastructure sooner.
So my next question was surrounding, because I was listening to the meeting and I was listening for keywords, and I was listening for the word construction of tanks. And so I didn't hear anything specific on the construction of tanks. And could this be a pressure fluctuation? Could this be a part of the issue with the pressure fluctuations because we don't have the tanks and there are any tanks in the coming?
No, nothing has indicated that this is due to the need to install additional tanks or reservoirs. Each segment of the city has its own, unique set of circumstances. So our commitment as far as the amount of gallons that we would deliver per day and the demand on the system, we have not gotten close to that commitment. So we're happy with the amount of water that we're able to deliver. But as far as the distribution, again, there are pockets of town that have water pressure issues. Again, it's a twofold issue. Some businesses or some households are receiving water pressure at our commitment level. However, in order for those businesses, and it's particularly businesses or buildings that have several stories, and that system has been designed to operate at a pressure 50 or 60 psi at times. So it may require the installation of a booster pump or other type of plumbing fixtures to be placed in that building, but it's not always an indicator that we're not delivering adequate pressure.
Okay, I think my issue with that is because we're able to go downtown, they got buildings, they go 30 floors. My buildings go 4 floors. And so to understand that the water pressure isn't reaching the 3rd and 4th floor, that's an issue to me. The reason I'm asking about tanks, the construction of tanks on the south side is because we understand the development. The development in my area has been amazing. A lot of new development, a lot of people working, but we still have jobs too. And so the stress on that, I want to make sure that we are focusing on the south side in our area in particular. Lastly, will there be a new construction requirement changes to provide their own surge?
So I do want to address your question about the availability of water on the south side. We don't have any issues with the availability of water. Again, these are water pressure issues. And I just want to explain that not all of those issues are associated with our utility infrastructure. There are some, again, issues where there's a very small segment that they're receiving or experiencing water pressure below 40 PSI. So I just wanted to provide a little clarification there. I'm not sure if I understood your last question about.
I think it's still around just water supply. Because I've been able to meet with a group of people who are special, their specialty is this. I'm always listening for keywords and the construction of tanks. Understand that their PSI, they've been studying their PSI since before this happened, but they were able to maintain 45. This is for, I don't want to say the name of the organization, but they've been able to watch this and monitor it in ways that we have not, even as a city, been monitoring this particular pipes.
Yeah.
And so some of the questions that I'm asking are coming from a team full of watershed professionals. And one of them was around the risk of piping degradation from the lack of pressure, and if a building is on fire, would a fire truck have enough pressure to put it out in that area? So because of them monitoring the pressure, they know that if a building was on fire, they know that the amount of pressure in that area, would a firefighter actually have the capacity to put it out on Gateway? And I'm talking about on Lee Street.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So far as the distribution of water potentially causing a degradation of water supply lines, I'm not connected to any of those complaints. We work closely with the fire department, and they perform routine and scheduled tests of our fire hydrants. They measure the PSI on those hydrants, and if there's a decline of pressure, if there's not adequate pressure, they let us know about that immediately. So there is absolutely no concern about AFRD being able to combat any type of fires. We're more than comfortable with that. Going back to your question about requiring businesses to, I believe, may have been installing a surge tank of some sort. You may have heard me mention a little bit earlier about a water resources planner looking at businesses such as data centers that consume several millions of gallons of water per day. Those type of businesses may require a surge tank just to make sure that they're delivering adequate pressure and they're not creating an undue demand on our system. But no, there is not a plan to require any businesses at this time to install a surge tank.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Matt Westmoreland.
One quick question and then one more request for information. When's the current deadline for the consent decrees?
So we're in 2027, I believe. 2027 is the consent decree. Yeah, 2027. Yeah, and so we're in the final two stages of the consent decree. So 2027 is the deadline.
Okay. And then could we also get the slide 9 and slide 21 versions of the 1,930 miles of sewer pipes? 9 and 21 are both relating to water pipes, but it'd be interesting to see the sewer breakdown as well.
Okay.
Not right now, but in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wiggins, I truly appreciate you. I understand that you took the ball, you start running with this, and I truly think that you're the right person to help us get through this. And thank you so much for being open to this and standing and taking all the questions from us. One thing I wanted to add to this as we close out this agenda is that the public comments are next, and I feel that we brought the public comment sign up sheet in a little earlier. So I want to make sure if it's okay with my colleagues, we can put this back out, the public sign-up sheet to make sure that anybody who showed up for this and sat through it are able to make sure you express your views to City Council. So I'll be placing this back to the front for a second.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Before I sit down, I just want to say thank you for the kind words, but the true heroes are the women and men of the Department of Watershed Management who work 24/7, 365 days a year. While we're in the comfort of our homes, asleep in our beds, they're doing the hard work of the city. I want to address, you'll hear the term water crisis. A crisis to me means that we didn't have a plan. I believe that we were well prepared, that we just faced a unique set of circumstances. I don't want to be cavalier about the folks who experienced the loss of water over several days. That is extremely important to us. But I will say that the teams that we have, they were committed. Some stayed for several days until this issue was resolved. But I do want to push back a little bit on the word crisis. It was a crisis to those who experienced it. And again, I don't want to be cavalier about it, but it was not a crisis as it relates to you having a team of committed employees who are prepared to address the worst case scenario. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. We'll proceed to public comment. And our first speaker, I saw the name, Mr. Devin Barrington Ward. And once again, this is different from other meetings in which the public are able to hear the presentation, hear council members, and then ask questions after that. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate this format because it was very informative. Commissioner Wiggins, thank you for answering some of the questions that I had prior to, particularly about the facilities, the water treatment facilities and the aging facility, and the fact that we are in a situation where contaminants are being leaked into the Chattahoochee River. So I'm pleased to see that that is something that is on the watershed's priority list. One of the things that I guess I have some questions about in terms of the support for small businesses. I'm encouraged to see that about 894 applications were submitted. I'm a little disappointed that the original proposal that myself and other business owners provided to council requested that that legislation be moved in an emergency fashion because now I'm under the impression that many of those businesses have still not received compensation, and for some of them, they still may owe employees money or are in a situation where they're behind on their overhead expenses because they're still waiting for these funds to be processed. One question I do have for Invest Atlanta and others is in the future, we know that there's the potential for this to happen again. And so what preparation is going to be done in advance to make sure that we aren't having to respond rapidly in this way, but that we know that we have an aging water sewer system. And so because of that, we should be prepared to make funds available to small businesses in the future. In addition to that, the area of town that I live in right now, we've not only been impacted by the water crisis, but we've been impacted by this ongoing Cascade Streets Improvement Project, which has led to businesses not only being impacted by not having any water for 5 days, but then also seeing a significant portion of their sales be reduced because of this ongoing project that we still don't have a completion date on. So I'm encouraged to hear that, Councilman Wan, you asked a question about whether or not these are going to be things that are considered in future improvement projects and how they impact businesses and residents. The last question that I do have for the commissioner is, we know that up until 2022, we've seen an increase in the amount of water that's been lost in the system. However, we don't have any numbers, I think, at this point for 2023, or at least I haven't seen them. And so I'd like to know what those numbers are for 2023. And so that way we kind of have a goalpost for this new AI system that is going to determine how much water is being lost, that we have a goal for the reduction of the amount of water that is going to be lost from our system moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrington Ward. The next speaker is Prophet Curtis. Prophet Curtis, I apologize. Prophet Curtis Harrison, I know you.
Tony is my nickname, yes. Well, again, we talk about watershed, which I said that I seen that under the water. I don't guess y'all thought I was making up something. I said that 4 years ago, that I seen Atlanta underwater. So, but then, again, you know, I hope that this doesn't take away from the funds that should be used for more homeless shelters, because we have your mayor and governor raised, they say $62 million for homeless people. And then consequently, that money never get to homeless people. Then you got Cop City, and then money like this is allocated for these situations, but yet money is also allocated for situations for homelessness, but it never get there. And these situations comes up, but these things get, which we all know we need water. But my point is this, I know, yes, it's been raining. I think it's raining now. But when it rains, it's flooded. I'm over on the street. I can't walk. It's a little bit of rain and your pipes, water this high off the ground. Water this high off the ground. And a little bit of rain in our neighborhoods, in African-American neighborhoods. The streets up there on Lee Street and Ralph Abernathy, y'all ought to be ashamed. Whoever district that is should be ashamed of themselves. Really, seriously. I know this is utilities. I know it's not zoning. Okay, now, but I'm saying this, that it rains a little bit of rain, and your floods are everywhere. Right there on Lennox Road and Crenshaw, it rains, and the water, you can't drive past there. Those type of situation issues that we have been facing since forever. So what I'm saying, I'm not trying to call out a specific district. I'm saying, I know from experience, because I walk through these neighborhoods. I'm talking to these people about the utilities and the zoning. I'm saying, they saying, well, this pipe leaking, when it rains here, we can't even drive our cars through here. And then the pipes bust underneath the ground. So if the pipes are old, I mean, if the pipes are old, and we know the pipes are old, this was just waiting to happen. I mean, this was the tragedy waiting to happen. Now people was out of water because the city didn't react. Those are the things that get people upset. And then people come down here and get angry and fuss, and this stuff should have already been taken care of. We talked about this with Keisha Lance Bottoms. We had a meeting about this with Keisha Lance Bottoms when she was here. So I'm telling y'all.
Thank you, Prophet Harrison. The next speaker, Mr. Robert Moore, Business Engineer Director.
Good afternoon, everyone. One of my points or key concerns as an engineering director is people safety. And so there was a question raised about the fire department's capability to be able to properly satisfy or mitigate a fire situation. The current NFPA guideline 25 edition requires annual fire pump testing that requires us to demonstrate between 100 and 150% of, let's say, an electric fire pump's capability. And so in order to conduct some of that testing, it requires a certain input of water. And so we're a commercial business, we represent a commercial business, and that's one of our primary concerns. That's one of the things that has required us to begin some of this analysis work. So we've kind of had a running start on some of the challenges that have now really shown themselves as of Memorial Day.
Mr. Moore, we need you to speak into the mic. I apologize.
So, because this is something we've been challenged with from trying trying to satisfy an NFPA requirement from a fire safety standpoint. This is the challenge we've been working through for some time. We understand that there's a relatively dilapidated infrastructure, but we do know that there are some things that can be done to stabilize water pressures. Definitely want to be a part of that solution. So whatever we can do to support that, we've had regular communications with the Office of Linear Infrastructure, as well as, just the accounts representatives from the Atlanta watershed. And so, as I mentioned, we're kind of where we heard that there's a very strong relationship with the fire department. We still have to manage to NFPA guidelines, and then we're also kind of subject to the amount of water available to us. So there has to be some support for business owners, and we see the bleed over as to what the effect is having on residents, and ultimately not only safety for commercial employees, but the impact we know that it's having on residents. Thanks.
Mr. Moore, can I ask you one question? Before the water main break, what was your PSI and what is it today?
We averaged in the mid 40s with peaks close to 50. And then post the Memorial Day event, we are averaging, as you said, around the mid 30 range. And so, and then we've seen dips close to 20. And so that's also an indication where we would typically go into a boil water advisory. And so we definitely have some opportunity to make some.
And I would like to say they're on the same line as the high rise that can't get water to the third and fourth floor. And so I would love if we could start working with them. Thank you again. So that would be the end of public comment. We'll go to number 5. Next steps. 1 second. We'll continue to work with the administration on next steps, and we'll make sure the information goes out to the public. At the adjournment of this meeting, we'll go back to the utilities meeting that's in the committee room one, the Larry Dingle committee room. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.